Thank you, everybody, for joining us on another episode of The Rising Warrior. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Karen Solt. Karen is a 20-plus year Navy veteran. She has a bachelor's and master's degree in psychology and counseling. She is an advanced holistic coach, and she even spent 18 months serving with Veteran Treatment Center, working directly with our homeless and addicted veterans. The main reason why we have her on today is she is in the finishing process of writing her book, which is focusing coming out of hiding. So, Karen, it is truly a pleasure. This is going to be a great podcast. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it.
When we talked earlier, yes, this is a veteran podcast, and yes, we're going to talk about your time in service, but when we talked earlier, you mentioned a lot of good things about your journey and your experience before the military. So I would love to start there.
Sure. So I was, I'm living back in my hometown, Prescott, Arizona. I was born and raised here, spent my first 18 years here. I was a little girl. I was late 60s, early 70s, and I was a little girl that struggled with my gender quite a bit. One of the first things that I said to my mom was, I hate dresses and I want to play with the boys. And I had an older brother and a younger brother who was born my older brother was about a year and a half older than me, and my younger brother was born when I was 5. And I was a tomboy. This was back in the days when gender issues were not issues. They weren't, there wasn't the awareness, there wasn't the social media, there wasn't the attention on TV. So I was just this confused little girl. And I have specific memories about the things I wanted to do and the things I didn't want to do. And so I remember the first time, like, my mom told me I had to start wearing a shirt. And I'm like, why? And she's like, because little girls wear shirts. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem right. Like, why am I being treated differently? So I had like this real awareness that I was different because I was a girl, but I kept fighting it and kept fighting it and kept fighting it. And then I was, I think, 9 or 10 years old when I tried out for Little League. And so, I always played with the boys. I played baseball, I played football. I don't know who I thought I was, but I thought I was a boy, I guess. And so I tried out for Little League, and the commissioner of Little League called that night and told my mom that my brother could play, but that I couldn't. And she said, why? And he said, because she's a girl and girls don't play Little League. And so I was devastated, but I just didn't understand it. Later on that night, this woman called, her name was Faith Blair. And her son ended up playing, or not, her grandson ended up playing in the major leagues. I don't remember his name. I always forget it. But she called that night and said, I was at the tryouts. I agreed to coach a team, but only if Karen could play on my team. And so I got to play Little League. And so I was this catcher, had long blonde hair, and I was, my hair was sticking out of my helmet, and I was this catcher. And I was being harassed by parents on the bench in the stands who were harassing me because I was playing Little League. And so they were really upset that I was doing stuff that they thought just the boys could do. And so it had a huge impact on me. And I wanted to play. I liked playing. I was good at what I did. I felt like I could compete, but I knew I was different. And so at the end of that year, I started to get really deep into being a misfit. I started to drink. I started to steal booze from my dad. My dad was an alcoholic. I started to just really rebel against the system. And the system back then for me was gender equality. I didn't understand it that way. But, now looking back 300 years later, I know what was happening. And so I turned into this misfit, and I learned how to be a chameleon. I learned how to adapt. I learned how to become who I needed to be, but I drank a lot. I ditched school. I barely graduated from high school. I had a friend in every corner. I was just this girl who was really angry, really confused, and didn't know why I was so different. did not know that I was gay at all, because in my hometown, even today, there's a really small population of gay people, and most of them are not visible
Mhm.
because it's not really safe to be visible, or it feels like it's not safe to be visible. So, that was my early childhood. When I was 18 years old, I was graduating from high school, barely. I was begging one teacher for a D, and he gave it to me, I think because he didn't want me back the next year because I was a nightmare to be around.
Whatever works.
Whatever works. He gave it to me. I graduated, and the Navy recruiter had contacted me. And I was like, I am not joining the Navy. There is no way in hell I'm going in the Navy. So I graduated. And so he had asked me questions, have you done drugs? Have you had homosexual tendencies? I said no to homosexual tendencies because I hadn't. But when he asked me if I'd done drugs, I said yes. And so he stopped and he said, be clean for 6 months and I'll contact you later. And I'm like, whatever. And so 6 months later, I'm working at a gas station, really winning. And this guy contacts me again. And he's like, have you done drugs in 6 months? And I said, no. And he said, how about we go down to Phoenix and we talk to some people? And I'm like, all right, whatever. So I get in this car with him. We go down to Phoenix and he takes me to MEPS. And for most of you, that's where we enlist in the military. And by the end of that, I talked to a person, then I talked to another person, and I was being processed in the Navy, and I had no idea. That I was being absolutely swindled into the Navy. By the end of the day, they're like, go stand on that platform. I go stand on the platform. Some dude is standing in front of me. He's like, raise your right hand. Everybody raises their right hand. I'm like, okay. I raise my right hand and I joined the Navy.
Wow.
And so this is October 83, right after high school, and 6 months after high school, and February of 84, I'm going in the Navy. And so that's how I ended up in the military. No desire to serve my country, was really very alcoholic by that point, was just struggling, but ended up in the military. So
Wow. I knew
Mhm.
recruiters were pretty shady and shitty people, but I've never heard anything.
oh yeah,
Wow.
it's
Yeah, I've
good.
heard of a lot of shadiness. That's a higher level of shadiness.
Yeah. I was a young girl who really didn't have like self-control. I didn't, because I was drinking so much and just really pretty wild. I didn't have the ability to understand when somebody was like really swindling me like that. And so, go talk to some
Mm.
people means go talk to some people. But, I get home that night. My mom is sitting on the couch, and I go upstairs and she's like, what happened? And I'm like, I think I joined the Navy today. And she's like, what do you mean you think? And she's like, let me see the paperwork. And she flips through it and she's like, yeah. And so I was on the delayed entry program. I don't know if they still do that, but
I
Yeah,
did
they
when
do.
I was in.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. And
Wow.
didn't even consider getting out of it. But I don't know. It felt like prison was coming up for me at the time.
What, yeah, I'm curious, what, obviously you're much removed from that experience, but what was, that sense of being about to go to prison basically, or what felt that way at the time? Why not protect yourself and get out of it? What was it that where you were like, well, this is just how it goes?
I think at the time, like I didn't have the wherewithal to even like I felt like I signed on the dotted line. And
Right, okay, like there's no way out.
I think today's generation has a lot more awareness that there's ways to get out. Like you could like
Yeah,
probably go to somebody and say, hey,
yeah.
look, I was swindled into this.
Call your congressman or whatever.
Right. Back
Mhm.
then, I just felt like I had signed it and that I was going. And if I didn't go, I probably would go to jail. And so
Mm.
I just think, the generationally, I just think the times were different. Um, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And I didn't even really try to. I just felt like I had sealed my fate, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure there are many people out, even if they don't get literally bamboozled like you did. I'm sure there are many young men and women who get in the military under that pretense. So they're like, oh my God, I signed up 3 months ago and I'm going to boot camp in a month. I don't think I can
Right.
get out of this at this point.
Right.
I'm sure that happens a lot. And when you're that impressionable, your brain hasn't really fully developed yet, you absolutely can make rash decisions that lead you there. And you might legitimately regret it. I mean, a lot of us certainly did while we were in.
Yeah.
So that's neither here nor there. So going into the Navy, you're sort of blind, that didn't know what you were getting into. What was it first, before we get kind of in the later stages of you coming out, or at least knowing that that's coming up for you? What were those first couple of years in the Navy like? And specifically around what made you re-enlist the first time?
So the first couple of years were really tough. It was 1984. They were just integrating women on board ships. And so I got to my first, I was a young, stupid girl from Arizona, and I found myself in Charleston, South Carolina. And on my first ship, which was a submarine tender. And so longer than 2 football fields, huge complement of people. I don't know, maybe 1,500 people, I'm not sure, hard to remember. But there was like 60 women on board when I got on board. And, I was really, really naive. I was 18 years old, just really was not aware of the world. And so, I stumbled my way up the brow on that ship, and I joined undesignated. So in the Navy, I did not have, I think for you guys, probably what you call an MOS.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have one. And so in the Navy, the other way I got bamboozled is that I joined up undesignated, so I didn't have a job, which meant that I went and I worked in the deck department. And the deck department is where like you chip paint and you repaint the ship and you tie the ship up when it goes, when it docks. And it's really
Hard labor.
intense. Yeah, it's really hard labor. And I was, my first division that I went to, I was really being sexually harassed. And by some pretty senior people, and I was an E1. And so I was really lost, really, really lost, and didn't have any friends. And I came from Prescott, where I had a lot of friends, and really just was pretty isolated. And so I also I was telling Lance when he and I had a talk before, within my first year, I was also sexually assaulted. And when that happened, I came back to the ship. I told one of my closest friends, who was also in our division, and she told our supervisor. My supervisor then confronted the guy who did it, and the guy who did it laughed and said it was my word against his. And then my supervisor laughed. And then I was confronted out on the deck department, where the guy who did it plus his friends confronted me. And so nothing was done. And so I was really just confused, because it was a really, really tough environment. Go ahead.
By the way, these are the examples that they would use to teach us about why the regulations exist when I went through training. Like that, what you just said is like scenario one of here's why we have these rules in the Navy. I went to the Naval Academy, so we had a lot of the education. So to hear you say that you were in the 1980s undergoing this is incredible. And
it was sorry, I interrupted you. It was, I think I was really lost, and I think I was also pretty alcoholic, and I got myself into situations. And so a lot of the things that happened to me in the military, I took blame for. And so, that would happen, and then I would blame myself. And then because I went on a date with him. And so, it was challenging. And I think that happens to a lot of young women in the military. They go on a date with somebody, and then it turns into my word against his word. And then there's like no proof because you're both drunk. And then, but sexual assault happens pretty regularly. And it took, and when I got out of the Navy is when I really processed a lot of that stuff, you know. When I was in, I had to kind of cover up and protect myself emotionally, because I think I would have lost my shit if I really processed everything. But I went to what they call mess cranking. And so in the Navy, what happens is that all young sailors go and they work in the mess decks, and that's the place that you eat. And so I went to the chief's mess and was taken out of my division, fortunately sent to the chief's mess. And even though in my division, I was actually being sexually harassed by my chief also. And it was really tough times back then.
God damn.
It was interesting. And but you know, but also like it was the submarine community. They had it was the Wild West on ships because they were just not used to women. And so we really disrupted their flow back then is what happened.
Good.
But we were just going where we were sent, right? And so it was a really tough position to put us in. And so I went mess cranking, and what happened for me is I met another woman who was mess cranking, and she became a really close friend of mine, and she was gay. And so that's when I started to realize, oh, some of the issues that I have and have always have is because I'm gay. And but this was still probably late 84, early 85 that I went and started hanging out with her and her friends, and I was like, oh, okay, like I fit in. For the first time in my life, I fit in. But this was like Don't Ask, Don't Tell started in 94. And so this was real early. And if you want me to keep going on this was back when we were being hunted. And so Don't Ask, like a lot of people understand what Don't Ask, Don't Tell is, and we can certainly get into that. Before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, NCIS, which is not just a TV show, it's actually people, they hunted us. And so, and there would be a couple of NCIS agents that would be stationed and attached to a large ship like that. And so they were trying to find us. And so we called it witch hunts, because what they would do is they could have no evidence, no proof, anything other than maybe even a picture, maybe just somebody else saying that girl is gay. And they would call you in, and then they would interrogate you.
Wow.
So you would be sitting there being interrogated. Then they would tell you, we'll go easy on you if you tell us who else is gay. And so they would, I mean, it was like you were a criminal. And then they would be so hard on you that then some people would actually turn in their partners, because then they think they were going to go easy on them. But the deal is that if you were found to be gay, you would just be you would be separated, and you'd be separated like really quickly. And so it was, so we were taught to look over our shoulder constantly. If we were out in town and we went to a gay bar, sometimes NCIS agents and other people on the ship would go and try to like be at the gay bar to see who goes to the gay bars. If you were even caught in a gay bar, you were assumed to be gay, and then you would be kicked out. So
wow.
And that was like immediate out processing, right? It wasn't like it was like drug use, like you're out.
It was like worse than drug use. It was
Wow.
Really?
It was, yeah. If my remembrance of it was that within 24 hours that person was gone.
Oh.
So it was and so it was typically an administrative separation. The girl actually who was my first best friend, who I'm still friends with, she was being sexually harassed really bad in her division. When she got to her division, and her senior chief sat her down and said, there are this is how I feel about women. There are two places for women. One is in the kitchen and the other is in the bed, something like that. And he said, do we understand each other? And she said, yes, senior chief. But she was absolutely harassed and harassed and harassed by not just him, but by other members in her division. And so after a while, she just turned herself in for being gay. So it was also a really easy way to get out.
If it'd been too much.
Yeah. And so that's how she got out. And but when somebody got out, so she got out, and I didn't have any contact with her, because if I had contacted her, asked her how she was doing, anything, then they would have known that I was her friend, and then I could have been separated too. Wow. So you didn't, like somebody was there one day and then they were gone the next.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of privacy on a ship. Definitely not back then, when there's no cell phones or social media, none of that stuff. There's no way to stay in contact other than a phone call on the ship, which people would know about.
Right. A phone call on the ship, or, like back then we had payphones at the end of the pier. So we would go down there, but, we would write letters to each other. And that was our primary mode of communication, and probably the safest.
Right.
For relationships, for everything, was probably the safest, because fortunately they couldn't open our mail.
Yeah. Right.
They would have tried if they could. Yeah.
So this was happening your first and second year in service.
This was happening my first 9 years in the service.
Okay.
Okay. So you asked about reenlisting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm curious about, because what I'm hearing is you're having a terrible experience. Not to mention the job sucks. You're being harassed. You're being assaulted. Basically, no one respects women, and you're being hunted.
Right.
Why on earth would anyone reenlist?
Right. Okay. So I'd been in for about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half or so, when the first lieutenant on the ship needed a yeoman. So the first lieutenant is the guy who runs the deck department, or the woman who runs the deck department. And so I got tagged to go down there and be the yeoman, and I fell in love with that job. And the yeoman that was working for him was going to go to yeoman A school. And then he found out that he would have to extend for a year. And so he was like, no. And so they offered it to me. So they offered it to me, and I said yes, because then I could get out of deck. I mean, it was a real carrot, because I liked it. I loved doing administrative work. I loved it. I was really good at it. And so I became a yeoman, which got me out of deck, which changed my life. I started working in the admin office. There was 3 of us that were in the admin office who were gay.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun. There's a lot of lesbians in the military. At least
yes.
Back then. I'm guessing still now.
I got out 3 years ago, and I would say that was still relatively accurate.
There's a lot of lesbians in the world. There was a lot of us in the military. I mean, the deal is back then, regardless of if I'm in the military or not in the military, I'm hunted back then. I'm not safe. And so I could come back to my hometown. I mean, I didn't have a lot going for me. So I could come back here if I wanted to, but I would still be hiding. And so I liked my job. I made 3rd class. And then I transferred to another ship down in Kings Bay, Georgia, because I met a girl, fell in love with her, my first girlfriend. And she was on that ship. And so I put in for a what's it called? A swap, hull swap. And so I swapped with a yeoman from that ship. He came back to Charleston. I went down there, and I mean, I found my people. And so I think it wasn't about, like, I liked my job and I was really good at it, but I loved the people. And so that's why I reenlisted. And when I reenlisted, I mean, I wasn't going to, but my master chief sat me down, and then we called the detailer, and the detailer said he had a 2-year tour down in the Caribbean on a little island called Antigua. And I was like, hell yes, I'm going to the Caribbean. And so I went to the Caribbean for 2 years. So I mean, it was kind of like when I enlisted, like I didn't have anything going for me still. Like I didn't have a degree. I didn't take advantage of like any of the benefits that the Navy gives you, because I was just this young alcoholic lesbian who was running from NCIS. I mean, I was just really trying to survive.
Yeah, survival. Yeah.
It was, but my survival was not dependent on the Navy. It was dependent on life. And
Mhm.
it would have been hard to be in or out of the Navy. And I had made some really, really close friends by that point who are still some of my best friends to this day. And
Mhm.
so that's why I stayed in.
Yeah, that's a really great point you make. I'm glad you're sharing that. And we want to keep going with the story because I'm curious. When Don't Ask, Don't Tell is being enacted in the 90s, but um, we really, when we talk to the people, the veterans who are connecting with our message and what we're putting out, is one of the biggest things about the military is exactly what you just said. Like a lot of kids come into the military with like, I got to get the fuck out of here. Whatever's going on in the military, I don't know, but this ain't it. So I got to
Right.
go. And so when they're in, there's this tendency to, you have a hard job or you have experiences like what you had, and that basically, like Lance and I've talked about it, it just puts your trauma in a pressure cooker, and
Mhm.
you're just constantly on alert, regardless of what your job is in the military. This is true for a lot of us.
Right.
Um, and you do create these bonds. You create these really strong bonds. One, because you're in really confined spaces, whether you're on a ship or in a battalion, in the infantry or whatever, you're always together. And then two, because you have these shared stories, shared experiences from back home. You talk to a kid, who's like, oh yeah, I had a similar experience getting beat up in high school, or I had this thing or whatever. And you're like, wow, I didn't realize there were so many of us, this type of person in the military. And then you have the addition of like this unified mission or objective or thing that you're all doing. And so it feels like you're all, whether you agree with it or not, you're kind of driving in this direction
Yep.
together, which is rare when you're just a student in high school somewhere in America.
Right.
So all those factors are really important to why people both are attracted to it. Oh, and not to mention all the kind of high and mighty in pie in the sky meaning and purpose things about why you're doing what you're doing to begin with. We haven't talked about that, but all those things bring people in the military, keep them in, and it's a lot of the reasons why they have struggles after they get out,
Right.
because now it's on you to figure out how to do that, and that is no small feat.
Right. 100%. Yeah, I think the military is just this big pot of misfits who come together
Yep.
for, and I mean, the mission is one thing, and I think definitely the mission, but I think it's just really we come together and we we become a family, and that's how I felt.
Mm,
And not just with my gay veterans, but with anybody, like everybody I worked with. I mean, I just felt like we took care of each other,
mhm,
and it just became something that was so second nature to me. And the higher I went in rank, the more protective I was of the people who worked for me. And um and I just became that person who, like, I loved leading people. I loved everything that I did
mhm,
in the military. I just really loved it. And didn't really like, I didn't like, I wasn't a person in the military today. I think I might have questioned some of what's happening today a
mhm,
lot more, but
mhm.
also, we were so sheltered from everything that was happening in the world.
Mm,
Like, it didn't matter who was the president back then. It didn't
right,
matter because
right.
the mission didn't change.
Yep.
And,
Mm.
the
Especially
missions,
in the Navy.
it stayed the
Yeah.
same. And
Mhm,
it was different. And man, I'm so grateful for it. Like I
mhm,
love, I like when I went back and I worked at VVSD at the Veterans Homeless Shelter. Man, I loved it. It's like,
mhm,
oh man, I missed you
mhm.
guys. Like, here's my people. But when I
Mhm.
got out, I was just like, I'm done. I'm so
Mhm,
done. And I
Yep.
needed that. I needed
mhm,
that too.
It-
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because I've talked to many veterans over time, and many of them have say the exact same phrasing, I'm done.
Yeah.
And they cut all ties with the military and all their friends and everything. And it takes them time before they can come back and
Mhm.
entertain the idea of being a veteran. And I
mhm.
think that space where we cut off from the military and then when we go back, it's a healing space. And I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people don't do that, and that's what keeps them in their loops.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the challenges is, and we've talked about it a bunch of times, is that your healing cannot be institutionalized. Like you can't heal the same way you were created in the military. It's not basic training to heal.
Right.
The journey is actually quite opposite. It's not stripping your identity. It's like regaining your sense of agency and sovereignty and knowing what that even means. And that journey is not one you have to decide to take, not one that you're taken on. It's like the complete opposite process for when you enlisted.
Yeah, it's taking the cloak off.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's getting out of hiding and starting to like,
Is
who
yeah,
are you really? Like, who are
Mhm.
you, and discovering those things.
right. Yeah.
So as you're going back to your story, you're in, you've enlisted at least one time already, or re-enlisted at least one time. You're really enjoying your job. You're still being witch hunted by NCIS, and you're kind of seeing this underbelly community
Yeah.
of
My
gay
gay
people who are kind
underground.
of, yeah, you're gay
Yeah.
underground
Mhm.
in the 80s and going into the 90s. So I imagine at this point, most people have a conversation at the 10-year mark they've been in, like, hey, do I want to stay in for a career 20, or am I done now? Am I complete with the service? So and that coincides around the time that you're talking about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So what was going on in your mind at that time, and what what kind of decisions made you stick even further in the military?
So after Antigua, I got sent to SingPac Fleet in Hawaii, and that's the 4-star admiral's headquarters in Hawaii. And I fell in love with Hawaii. Fell in love with everything about it. Love Hawaii. Loved being at SingPac Fleet. I worked for the ops officer directly, and he was 06 captain who was up for admiral, and I worked for him and the fleet ops officer. So 2 06s, I was their yeoman in their front office, and loved it. And that was 1989. I got sent there, and I also met my partner, who is now my ex, but we were together for 19 years.
Hmm.
And so I was a second class at that time in E5, and just loved the job. But this is during like the time frame when like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Desert Storm, which is completely different than Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Desert Storm, Desert Shield, all that stuff was happening. And I just had this like insight to like military operations that I never had before. And so fell in love with this woman, was sailor by day, gay by night. Really learned the skill of hiding a lot more, because there was a lot more on the line. She was an E6, I was an E5. We learned how to, like, I have this one chapter in my book I call Forbidden Love, where I talk about like when we're out in town, like even walking next to each other at like in the mall, if our hands would even like swipe next to each other, like there would be like this, I would brace, because I was always afraid that somebody would see us. And so I really learned how to navigate like this love, because I was really in love with her. And I really had to learn how to navigate that in hiding. And so it was just like the next step deeper into hiding, right? And so at the end, we were together for about 2.5 years when she got stationed at a little island called Diego Garcia, in the middle of the
nowhere.
Yep.
God dang.
And so she got sent out there with the promise that she would be sent back to the location of her choice when she did a year. And so she left, and I hit rock bottom with addiction at the same time. So my alcoholism, so she left in May of 92, August of 92, I got sober. And so next month I'll have 30 years. And so it was thank you. It was a really, really, really tough time. Right after I got sober, I made first class. And so I had re-enlisted again for a squadron that was on Oahu on an air base called Barbers Point that is now decommissioned. And so I was going to Barbers Point with the belief that she was coming back to Hawaii because she was going to get the location of her choice. Another empty promise, right? But were you both married while you were on active duty?
I was not, no.
I was the last year.
Okay, so like now, like straight people got what was called co-located with their spouses, right?
Yes. Yep. That still exists.
We did not, because we were in hiding, and so
Right.
so we were always assumed to be single, right? So like my next of kin was my parents.
Mm.
You know, everything that we did, we were assumed to be single. So we were treated single. We had to hide like we were single. She came back after 6 months on leave, called the detailer, and was told she could go to Guam, or Guam. And so she got sent to
Oh,
Guam so we were apart for 3.5 years.
Mm.
And that was the first 3 years of my recovery. It was a really, really, really hard time. It's the meat of my book. But I made first class, and then I got transferred to VP1, which was it was a P3 squadron out of Barbers Point. And that was when I became all sailor, like super very driven. I was just sober. Like my addiction went from like drinking to
attention,
oh man, I was success driven, all the things, right? And so I had
tighten the bun a little bit more.
pretty much. I didn't have one. I had a really short butch haircut, but yeah, metaphorically, I tightened
metaphorical bun.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I transferred out there. And that's when I met the man who would become my mentor, the guy, and he was the command master chief of the squadron. And I wanted to be just like him. And so
Karen, just for those who aren't Navy folks, a P3 squadron is an aircraft. It's a plane, big plane, rotors. Just for all you out there. So she went from ship life, or I guess it would have been shift, to onshore operations to a squadron of aircraft.
Yeah, and so I get out to VP1, and I'm told that we're going to deploy to Diego Garcia.
Oh,
so a couple months after I report there, I'm going out to the same island that my partner is on, and so I'm going to get to see her for like a couple of weeks before then she transfers to Guam, and I won't see her for another couple of years. And so, it's just this wild, like, universe, just small world, small Navy, all this stuff was happening. And so I got there, and but Diego Garcia is a tiny, tiny island, super tiny. They call it the footprint. It's like, I don't know what they call it, but it's like a footprint shape. And so I go out there, and all eyes are on us. She's a first class up for chief. I'm now a first class wanting to become a chief. And we are both very much in hiding, very driven with both of our jobs. And so we see each other, but we're both very much in hiding, and we don't have a relationship when we see each other, which was really hard and confusing for me, because like, even we were both in the barracks. But like, we did not have zero affection, zero nothing, because getting caught would have meant the death of our careers, and neither one of us was willing to risk our careers at that point. Questions? We good?
I'm very fascinated. There's so many different levels to this that I'm gleaning. First of all, I know nothing about the Navy. I'm an Army infantry grunt. I know very little about co-mingling, co-ed stuff, because I was infantry. We didn't have any. And then what's blowing my mind is how my type of people, the infantry, the door kickers, the grunts, we're always looking behind our back because we're afraid somebody's going to, do stuff to us. We go into the restaurant, we pick the corner in the back with our face facing the entrance because we want to see what's going on. You're looking behind your back for a totally different level. And it's blowing my mind seeing this other part of the military that I have zero experience on. So this is very, I don't want to say enlightening, but we'll say enlightening.
Yeah, it's a different kind of trauma. And I think when I wrote the book, and all of the trauma, all of it came up. and out and had to.
Mhm.
But I've done some EMDR on it and stuff. And,
Mhm.
you know, and what my therapist has said is, you know, there are specific traumas and then there's a lifetime of trauma. And this
Mhm.
has been a lifetime of trauma of
Mhm.
looking over my shoulder. So I do the same thing. You know, I don't like my back to the door.
Mhm.
I'm forever looking over my shoulder. I do things like I avoid pride because pride means that I'm vulnerable. Um, and you know, and I try to, like, I'm as visible as I can be, but out in public, there is a part of me that is just constantly looking over my shoulder.
Mhm.
Mm.
When people know that I'm gay, I mean, I can chameleon, but what I try to do is I try to be really honest about who I am today, which
Mm.
puts a target on my back.
Mhm.
And I
You,
know
s-
that
you still feel that way?
100%.
Mm.
Yeah, that has not gone away for me.
Mhm.
And the climate of the world today, I mean,
Much
prides
more, much
prides
more
are
accepted.
getting attacked. And
Mhm.
Mm.
there is a lot of acceptability for homophobia and things like that. And so, you know, the difference today is that I'm really honest with my journey today.
Mm.
And so I'll say the thing, you know, it took me forever to say I'm gay. Took me forever to say it without like that, you know, that bracing that you
Mhm.
get.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, that bracing where like I'm like immediately in fight or flight just by saying those two words.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because those two words represent danger, or they always
Right.
did.
There's a lot of history behind those two words for you.
Yeah, huge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And my biggest trauma was because I said those two words. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that's what sealed, and then that sealed it kind of within me for 2.5 decades before I wrote the book.
Mhm.
Wow.
Um, so yeah.
So as you're experiencing, and I want to come back to this point because I think the experience of what you just said about bracing when you express to somebody that you were gay, it both holds a lot of value because of your experience specifically around being gay in the military, being gay in society at that time, and also that sense of bracing, the trauma response of like the tightening, the
Mhm.
tension that so many of us are holding that has to do with a lot of other things as well. So this is just one dimension of it, which
Right.
is it was kind of central to your story. And I want our listeners to also, you know, think about where you are bracing, like what areas of your life do you find yourself bracing? Where does it come up where you don't necessarily intend it to, where you become defensive or without really even realizing, where you're hiding, holding tension without really realizing you're doing it. And I think it's a very common experience, especially if you've gone through any trauma at all, but also a common experience in the military in general, where again we're compounded, right? Lance has talked about being in infantry and like sitting at the back, you know, back of the place and looking at the exits and seeing who's getting too fucked up. Um,
Mhm.
our capacity to at the beginning just recognize it, and then later to slowly be able to build a capacity to be like, oh, I'm safe, this is okay,
Right.
nothing's going to happen here. And then what that allows you to do afterwards is even more incredible when you're
Right.
trying to heal. Um, so to your point, you were in the Navy going through this period with your partner, barely talking to each other. Um, it sounds like it's barely a relationship.
It's challenging. It's
Yeah.
super challenging because for the first 2.5 years we were inseparable. You know, I mean, we
Right.
lived together, we worked together. I mean, not in the same like exact place, but close. So we were, I mean, just inseparable. I was just
Mhm.
really, really, really in love with her.
Mhm.
Um, and but then, yeah, I mean, there weren't computers and email back then, so
Mhm.
it was snail mail, and you know, and we had some really, you know, we had some deep challenges around communicating with each other. And, you know, it was challenging because, you know, what she was dealing with on now the ship out of Guam and going all over the place, and what I was dealing with at the squadron and deploying, you know, to different various places was just different. And so, you know, she would call me, from these like wacky places like Abu Dhabi,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And she'd call me, and she, and I knew that she'd have to stand in line for a payphone for like an hour
Mhm.
just to get a 10-minute phone call with me.
Mhm.
And so for 10 minutes, like, and then we can't say I love you, and we can't, say babe, and we can't, I mean, the phones were monitored. If I
Right.
was in Diego Garcia and she would be able to get a hold of me, the phones were monitored. And so we had to act like we were just friends, which really, was, I mean, it pushed us into this place to where intimacy and vulnerability became a huge challenge for us.
Mhm.
And it was tough. It was really, really tough. But we worked through it as best we could for those, 3.5 years actually that we were apart.
Mhm.
Um, during that time frame, for I had a few challenges with men during that time frame. One was when I went to Diego Garcia, her cousin came and stayed at the house and watched my house, and
Mhm.
we had a cat, and so he watched the house and the cat, and he somehow thought that he and I were in a relationship together. And um so then he somehow figured out that she and I were together when he had some friends over, and they saw a picture of us and they're like, that is not your fiance. Those two are our partners, they're gay. And then he wigged out on me and stalked me. And so when I got back, there's this guy living in my house who was stalking me. And that was really, really scary and dangerous. And he started to write letters to my command and to her command. And he would write it like a letter to me, to my command, from her. And then he would say, it's from her, my lesbian buddy. So he was trying to get us both kicked out. And I mean, I called the police. Like, it was intense. And so at the same time that he thought that we were in a relationship together, my mentor also fell in love with me, the guy I was telling you about. And so I had two, and I was closeted to both. And so that was another huge challenge of being in hiding, because I couldn't be honest with people about who I was
Right.
without getting
Mhm.
kicked out of the Navy. So today, I mean, a guy has a crush or whatever, and it's, I'm gay.
It's the
And
first, yeah, it's the first thing you say.
right. And
Mhm.
most men respect that and,
Mhm.
go with it. But I couldn't be honest with either one of these guys. And so I don't know how the cousin got the impression that he and I were in a relationship, because we were not. But he had created this fantasy in his world. And then same thing with my boss, the command master chief. He had created, this fantasy that he and I were in a relationship together. And
Like no exchanges of any kind, physical touch, nothing.
no, when we were on deployment, and I mean, we were kindred spirits. So
Yeah.
there was that. And so I was
So,
newly sober.
mhm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying there's a connection, like a friendship, but
Connection.
not, yeah, yeah.
Connection. So huge mentorship.
Mhm.
Wanted to be just like him, but he saw me differently. And
Mhm.
and so what happened there was that we're getting ready to come out of deployment, and he calls me into his office, um and a wife, or not a wife, his wife was called by another chief, and that chief told his wife that he and I were having an affair, which we were not. And
Man.
so, but his wife believed that he and I were having an affair. And so he calls me in his office and says, I need to tell you something. A chief told my wife that you and I are having an affair. I'm still a first class at the time. And he says, but I do want you to know that I have feelings for you. And I said, well, I don't have feelings for you. You're my mentor. Like, it's not mutual. And so, but I worked
And
for another 2 years.
so it got weird.
After that, it got, I mean, he was still my mentor, still all the things at work, but it got weird.
Mhm.
And so I was really in a lot of ways biding my time, because I knew that he I knew that she always believed that we had an affair.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2 years later, I'm leaving Hawaii and I make chief. And, I have 11 years in at that point, and it's like everything to me. It's like every enlisted person wants to be a chief. And so I make chief, and I'm going, and I transfer to Whidbey Island. We do a home port change. And so I go to Whidbey Island for like 6 months. And then I'm getting stationed down in San Diego, and I'm going to reunite with my partner, who is now in San Diego. And so I just can't wait to get back with her, start living our lives again, get away from the squadron. Like, I love the squadron, but it was weird, right? It was,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted him to be free of, like, I wanted both of us to be free of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I won't tell you exactly what happened, because it's a lot of my book, but
Sure.
he tells me again that he's in love with me. And he tells me that on the first day that I come in as a new chief. So I come in, it's like the best day of my career. I'm wearing my new khakis. Everybody's calling me chief, right? First time in my career. It's like, it's a really altered experience to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
Under.
Yeah, I can hear that, man.
For those of you ground pounders, chief is E7, and it's also, it is a bigger deal in the Navy. I don't know why exactly, but it is a bigger deal when you make E7 than it is in the Army and the Marine Corps. There's like a different, like,
Well, you change uniforms, everything.
change uniforms, everything. You're seen completely differently. I think in the Marine Corps, you become more, it's more like E5 to E6. That's like the big transition, but it's not quite as like big as the chief thing. So it's a huge accomplishment, especially for a woman in the 90s.
It's because they hand out promotions in the Army like candy.
And the Army is a little different, even more than the Marine Corps. Yeah.
I got promoted. Continue, Karen, please.
Well, back then we went through initiation too. So there was a difference.
Right.
Today, I think, I don't know if they call it induction. I mean, it's gone through different phases of words, but back then
they still do something.
Yeah, they do something. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a huge transition process, but back then we were initiated, which was a lot of hazing, and
mid-career boot camp, basically.
it really, it was quite an experience. So, but huge honor. And I show up that day, he calls me in his office and he hands me his Master Chief anchors. And so anchors are what we wear on our collars. And I had just made E7 and he was an E9. And so he says, I want you to have these for the day that you make Master Chief. And so, he's my mentor. I'm like, huge honor, all this stuff. And then he tells me that he's leaving his wife, and he tells me all the things that I don't want to hear, and that he's in love with me. And, it was the second time that he had told me that he's in love with me. And, I took a huge chance that day, and I told him that I was gay. And I could have been kicked out right in that moment, because that was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I was telling the most senior leader in my command that I'm gay. But I felt like at the time that I just, it was like a do or die kind of moment, right? It's like either I'm gonna like hide again, or I'm just gonna be like, like, this is the truth. And I didn't know what he would do with it, but I won't tell you exactly what happened, but I will tell you, it was the biggest trauma I've ever gone through. And one that really sealed, like I had to seal it up inside of me to serve out the rest of my career. And that's what came up in the book, for the most part. Like, that was the healing process I had to go through, was that experience. And so for the rest of my career, those two words, I'm gay, were two words that I was really, because I felt like if I said I'm gay, not only was I in trouble, but I also it created trouble for other people. And so it created this huge, I don't know, vacuum of trauma. I don't even really know how to put it, but I felt like I was a danger to other people by being myself. And so I served another 11 years. I got transferred down to SEAL Team 5, which was the joy.
I mean, your career just keeps getting more intense at every turn. Going
Yeah.
to a SEAL team is not a walk in the park, even for the people who work in the admin.
No, but it was the place I needed to be.
Mm.
What was that like?
I love those guys. Like
Mm.
it was, because the SEALs are like, they're not like in the Navy, right?
No.
They're like their own little special entity and they play by their rules. And so that's right up my alley. And I was this hardcore like Navy chief. And I remember one of the first things that happened, I show up at this command and there's this lieutenant walks in like the first day. And he's this officer and he's like, "Hi, my name is Frank." And I'm like, "Frank?" Right. And I'm like,
First name.
I'm like, "I'm Chief Solt." And he just looks at me and he's like, "You'll chill the hell out eventually." And I did. Like those guys, like I never talked about what happened in my previous command because I couldn't. But those guys helped me to chill out. I mean, they really, like, I became a chief and I became like, I loved it. And still some of my closest friends are retired Navy SEALs. Just really, really, not only the SEALs, but the techs that I worked with, it was what I needed at the time. So where do you want to go from here?
Yeah. I'm really curious about the SEAL experience a little bit. And I'm more curious about like don't ask, don't tell being in the Navy around this time. Partly because it's kind of an oxymoron, like being on a SEAL team is like being in a like I'm trying to find a good analogy for it for people who are on SEAL teams. I know a few guys in it and special forces in general, but their job is extremely intense. But when they're not on the job, it's like everyone is hanging out in flip flops and
Yeah.
They know
calling each
how
other
to
by their
flip the
first name.
switch.
Yeah, I mean, even in the compound, like we wore PT clothes all day.
Exactly.
So as long as you didn't leave the compound, we wore blue running shorts and a brown t-shirt. And so it like demilitarized me somewhat.
That's what I'm curious about. Is that kind of like the turning down of the volume a little bit, especially since you're not a SEAL, so you're not on mission or whatever.
Right.
Turning down the volume, and then as this kind of lurking thing, don't ask, don't tell, is coming around, where it's NCIS is no longer hunting people, but it's not quite like celebrated to be gay and to be open about it.
No. So
Which
the
was
only thing,
repealed during the Obama administration, correct? Is that right?
Yeah.
2011 is when people could start serving.
I was in school when that started happening.
Yeah. So the only thing that really happened, well, not the only thing. So a few things happened with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. One, we quit being witch hunted, but there was still a lot of people that got kicked out. Still, like, I want to say 12 to 1500 people annually still got kicked out. So they were still hunted by like homophobic people. And so if you got caught, I mean, there's a lot of people who were kicked out during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I want to say, like, I could be off on this, 14,000 people during those years. I mean, it was still a huge problem, but on enlistment and security documents, there was a question that said, "Have you ever had homosexual tendencies?" And both of those were removed. And so every time I went up for like a security clearance, like investigation or whatever, that question scared the crap out of me. Because like I had like an SBI, I mean, I was a yeoman, so I did a lot of classified, and that question was always like hanging over my head. And so after that, it wasn't hanging over my head anymore. So that was taken out. And then I think that was it. I mean, it was really like, as long as you didn't say I'm gay, the deal is you could keep serving, but it didn't mean that people still weren't kicked out.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but your experience at the time was like, you kind of relaxed both in your unit, in terms of like the intensity of the military and with the policy as it changes. Or at least that's what I'm hearing.
It did make things better. Because not being hunted was a huge deal. I still looked over my shoulder, like, but I still do, but that, it did, like, a lot of people will say like, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was horrible. And I will tell them, no, what was horrible was before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was horrible, but it was a step in the right direction. The problem with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or a problem, was that it was kind of like the gay community, the LGBT community, LGBTQ, like we're kind of used as pawns. And so Clinton at the time promised that he would make things better for the gay community. And then he really didn't. Like he ended up, like we got Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but that was, General Powell was the one that actually recommended that, whatever. But then DOMA, then Clinton signed DOMA, which was the Defense Something Marriage Act, which meant that that gay people couldn't be married. So he really became very hypocritical, in my opinion. And that just, there's so much pressure, I think, against, people who are marginalized in general. There's so much pressure to keep us oppressed for some reason. And so you might go in with like I'm going to do this as the president. And then you get in there and you find out, yeah, I'm really not going to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the nature of politics, especially at that scale. And in defense, it's probably still the most stringent place in our society. Our society may be further ahead by like leagues from what's going on in the military or in the defense kind of world anyway. Right. And even society is controlled to some degree by these laws and regulations or whatever. So it's interesting to see how it's progressed. Like you very much said, like in the beginning, it was like harassed by your chief, harassed by the guys in your unit, harassed by everybody. All the way up to now where you're in a SEAL team, everyone's kind of having a familiar relationship with you. Don't ask, don't tell. So things have been getting better for you. And still in the culture, it's still kind of crazy to hear that even in the 90s. And I imagine now it's even crazier. So if someone who's a veteran, who's a gay veteran, who was not open or out during that time, to hear you talk about the 80s and 90s must be transformative, especially as we haven't even gone through 9/11 yet. We haven't gone through any of this in this part of your story. So I'm curious, to kind of towards the end of your career, fast forward a bit to, I imagine you were it must have been early 2000s, right?
Yeah, I got out in 2006.
Okay. So as you're going kind of during 9/11, post 9/11, what keeps you in the Navy? Why do you decide to get out? What is kind of what we usually start the podcast, which is the transition. What is the transition from the military like in those first couple of years?
Yeah. So I was so fast forward, I hit 20 years and I have terminated shore duty to try to make Master Chief because I'm an idiot. And so I'm on an aircraft carrier, deployed on an aircraft carrier, trying to make Master Chief. And I love the people. I have always loved the people to this day. Best part about the military, the people. But I'm on the ship and what happened for me is I thought, I have zero freedom. I don't have freedom. Like I can't be myself on the ship personally. I mean, I had friends who knew I was gay and people in my squadron who knew I was gay. But I was so much in hiding and I was so tired of it. And I hit the 20-year mark and then I was like, what the hell am I doing in the military anymore? And so I put in my retirement papers on that deployment because I realized that it wasn't okay to not be free anymore. And was miserable in many ways on that deployment. It was a really tough deployment. We lost one of our airplanes, lost 4 people. It was tough. And so I got home, transitioned out, was just so over it.
You were tired at this point.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. And so on my last day, I write in the book, I drive home. I can't do a retirement ceremony because my partner would be sitting in the front row. I can't give her the flag. I can't be myself. I have so much bottled up. at that point that I knew that even like passing the flag and all the things that I've been a part of for other people's ceremonies, I can't do that.
Wow.
I cannot.
That's incredible.
There's no way I can stand up and talk about my career and watch my partner in the front row, who I'd been together with at that point for 16 years. There's just like, I'm a wreck. And so I drive home. I walk up the stairs. I take off my uniform. I take off my ribbons and my anchors and all the things. I put those in a keepsake. I walk back downstairs and I throw my uniform in the trash, and I'm done. I'm just done. I don't go to the commissary. I don't go to the exchange. It wasn't that I mean, I think a lot of my friends thought that I turned my back on the military. It wasn't that. It was that I was trying to find me prior to the military. And the me that was prior to the military was no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, you were a girl.
the wild, free young girl who, you know, had some sense of like independence, all those things that I just like really crave. I was lost, really lost. And so I started this journey, but I figured out, and so like 3 years after I retired, she is still closeted to her family, and we've been together for 19 years. And I am sick and tired of being
in the closet.
Yeah, in the closet. Like my family all knew about her, but there was so much shame and fear that just permeated everything, right? And I was really battling that. And so as I'm trying to come out and be myself, she's really afraid of rejection. And she had a uncle who was really tortured by, and I don't want to say tortured, but he was gay, and he, you know, ostracized quite a bit. And so she had seen it in her family and was afraid of that. And but we just got to this place to where we couldn't do it anymore. And so I split with her. I moved out on my own. I got a dog. He's still with me. And his name is Paco. He's my guy. And I just started my life over, and I became a personal trainer. And then I started this holistic journey. And then I fell in love with psychology, and I went to school and was super, super driven in learning about psychology, and had a new girlfriend. And it's like so I'll fast forward some. It's 2017, new girlfriend, 2 dogs, a house, whatever, doing good, thinking out to everybody in my life, all this stuff. And I'm in this online forum, and I have a rainbow next to my name. And a guy on the guy in the forum says, "Hey, Karen, why a rainbow?" And it's a guy who knew I was gay. And I froze. And so that bracing, I absolutely froze in that moment. And I'd been out for 11 years, and I thought I was free. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't free. And so I lied, and I said, "I just love the colors of the rainbow." Because all I had to say in that one moment was because I'm gay. But in that one moment, what it felt like for me was that here's all of these people in this online forum, and none of them know me, and I'm not safe, right? And so
Not safe to be
lied.
seen in your full self.
I mean, I had created this thing where like everybody in my life knew that I was gay, but there was this unpredictability that I wasn't ready for.
Yeah, the people who were close to you knew, but the world at large did not.
Right. Like I'm not walking around, like I don't have a gay flag on my car, and I don't, I'm not putting myself in situations where I'm going to be susceptible to getting, what felt like murdered is what it feels like. And so in my body, it feels like if somebody knows that I'm gay and they're homophobic, I'm not safe. And the truth is that I'm not safe. What they do with it, I don't know. But what it feels like in my body is it feels like somebody wants to hurt me or kill me. That's what it feels like. And so that was a turning point. And I came out of that. I hit another huge rock bottom at that point. And that's when hiding and hydology and all of the things, the work that I do now, like I came out of that illness, like sick and tired of hiding, like sick and tired of it. And so I started doing this process of coming out from hiding. And not just for being gay, but for being a perfectionist and a people pleaser and a rescuer and a say yes person and all of the other ways that I've learned how to hide. And I started to see it in just all of these ways. And then I started to see that it's not just because I'm gay. It's everybody hides. And I started to see it in everybody. And I started to see the ways that we do it. And I sat down and I started writing a book. And that was a self-help book on coming out from hiding. And then I'm writing that book. New girlfriend and I break up, and my father passes away. And so it's 2019, and I come home from my dad before he dies, and just this, he had Alzheimer's, and this tortured man his whole life. He finally got sober too, but like I never saw my dad do anything easy until he died, and he had the most peaceful death, and I was just like, wow. But then my mom was not okay. And so I lived in San Diego at the time, and I moved back home. And so I find myself back in this conservative small hometown, which I love. It's beautiful up here, mountains and lakes and all the things. It's nothing not beautiful about Northern Arizona. And then 2020 hits and COVID, and I joined this class to write a book. And so I start writing. So I show up with my self-help book, and there's like 6 women in this class, and I'm hiding. I'm hiding with my humor. I'm hiding with my writing. And I sit down, I start having these private sessions with my coach, the coach who's leading the course. And I tell her some of my experiences in the military. And she's like, well, that's what you have to write. And I'm like, there's no way in hell I can't write that. Like, if I write that, that will kill me. And so she's like, but that's what you have to write. That's what the universe is calling. And so I started writing it, and I started writing the whole journey, the witch hunts and the trauma and the relationship problems and the ways I had to hide and all of it. I started just writing it, and I just was, and we were social distancing, and I was in my hometown, and my mom was suicidal and not doing well. And really, I just was in this like tough place of extreme depth and what I would consider now to be like a psychosis. I was struggling. And I was doing therapy on the phone with a VA therapist who probably, I would say she probably saved me. And I'm writing this book, and I was just struggling, but the more I wrote, the more it released out of me. And then it came to the day, and I was driven, like, I just could not stop writing it once I started, and just sobbing, like, it was insane, absolutely insane. But I came out of it with this, what I would consider to be this really incredible memoir about my truth that I'm really, really, really proud of. But it was really hard. But by writing it, it liberated me.
It's not the first time I've ever heard somebody say that.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful tools I quite often talk about is, first of all, breathing properly, but second of all is writing shit down. And it can be so cathartic. All you got to do is write it down.
Yeah.
There's what we do is we help people do what you just talked about, except by using somatics and coaching and being able to help people understand their patterns, how they manifest physically, how they get wired into your nervous system. We take a very holistic approach to it. But as you're talking, what comes up for me is the theme that's true for the thing you said, man. It hit me so hard. The thing you said about not in 2017 being out for 11 years and going, holy shit, I'm still not free.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you came back to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been there. I remember for me, it was much different. And I think it happened for me quicker than I imagined. But I had a moment like that where I was in a kind of corporate gig working in defense consulting, and it was a very similar environment to the military. And I found myself kind of repeating patterns with the people, people pleasing, and sort of being in these rooms with retired, colonels and stuff. And I was like, holy shit, I'm not free.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we are trying to teach veterans and also help them understand is that the freedom that you get when you're out is the first taste of like taking off the uniform. There's a period where it's like it's either really destabilizing or really exciting, and usually both. It's like really destabilizing, really exciting, because you're like, whoa, what's going on here? I'm out of the military, no structure. And the longer you're in, the more difficult that is. So, you were in for 20 something years. If you're in for 4 or 5, it's not quite as intense, but it's still there.
Yeah.
The process of truly learning to be free, which I consider to be more about inner freedom than outer freedom. You first create the inner freedom that then creates the conditions in your life that become outer freedom. You have to look at your trauma. You have to sit with it. You have to be with it. You have to not just process it, but transmute it. Like, you learn how to be with it, and then you go, okay, how can I show up differently? What
Right.
beliefs can I change in my life so that I don't necessarily need to continue repeating that pattern? And it's not I did a program that was 90 days. It was really transformative, but it's not a 90-day thing. It is sometimes it's also not linear. So sometimes it's for people 10 years. And so some people, they spend less time in that dojo, let's say, of contending with your trauma. But what happens is, like you're describing, is that like you're kind of this compressed titan, like you said, you bracing human, and then you start just slightly opening just a little bit. And every time you're able to open up even more, and as you're talking about this book, it's reminding me of that whatever your method of not just catharsis, but of releasing, that enables you to see the world slightly differently. Like, what's possible when you're not bracing anymore. And that, for most humans, definitely veterans, is a scary thing, because that's the true unknown. It's not just something out there beyond you. It's like, what exists when I don't have this pressure on me anymore?
Right.
When I don't have this tension anymore? I'm so used to suffering. What is that when you don't have it anymore?
Yeah. What happens when I truly allow myself to be free? Yeah.
Boom, clip it.
That's a sound bite.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'll talk about my experience. I'm truly being free is a process. Like you said, it's non-linear, and it's layers of an onion. For me, it was a big thing recognizing, behaving and acting. How do I want to say this? Behaving how I want to behave, not according to how society, how my family, how your religion, how your work wants you to behave. And then behaving on like who you want to be.
Right.
And when you're in the military for 4 or 5 years, you're doing everything on the military basis. Or 20 years, like John said, might be more difficult peeling back the layers of the onion and getting down to who you truly are. And it sounds like you're going through that wonderful process, and it sounds exhilarating.
It
Yeah.
sounds beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like how I feel about myself today is nothing compared to how, I mean, it's just so different. And what I think it's been this really interesting process, because like I was hiding before I came in the Navy with addiction, with, really like misfit behavior, things like that. Just, there was I was hiding before I came in, and then the military just kind of helped me hide a little bit more, put a uniform on me. Then it really takes, then my identity goes a little bit more. And then I figure out that I'm gay. I hide a little bit more. And then I have trauma because I'm gay. I hide a little bit more, and I keep hiding. And then I get to this place to where I figure out, okay, the freedom doesn't come from anybody in society giving me my freedom back. Like nobody. Anybody that's homophobic against me, it's like their problem. Like, that's not my problem anymore. Does it create a world where I'm less safe? Yes, it does. So it is a problem, right? However, it doesn't mean that I'm going to change who I am anymore based on somebody else's belief about me. And that's where I really have to get to, is I have to get to this place to where the hiding, it's like this question that I ask myself now. Am I safe, or am I unsafe, or do I just feel unsafe? And there's a difference,
Mhm.
but there's still a huge reality for me that I think straight America doesn't experience. Like I'm now single. It's easy to be a single lesbian in my hometown because I'm not walking around holding hands with a partner. If I have a partner and then I want to go downtown with my partner and I want to hold hands with her, there's a target on my back. There's
Mhm.
not a target on my back as just a single person walking around town. There's there's still layers where I'm not safe in the world.
Still there
However,
for you. Yeah.
oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still
Mhm.
there. And
Mhm.
I have to be safe with myself. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like, if I get in a, if or when I get in another relationship, am
Mhm.
I gonna make that decision to hold my partner's hand downtown? If I choose
Mhm.
to, you're damn right I am.
Mhm.
Right? What I'm not gonna do is I'm not gonna avoid holding her hand
Mhm.
because of somebody else's opinion.
Mhm.
And so it's like every little step is like a step away from bracing. Like I have to
Mhm.
feel it, I have to feel
Mhm.
the bracing, and then I have to go, and I'm gonna keep being me. I gotta keep being me.
Mhm.
Because for so long, I wasn't myself, or I hid myself based on, I truly wasn't safe in the military being
Mhm.
myself. That was
Mhm.
the reality. But then in society, you know, I have to be me now, because if
Mhm.
I'm not, then I'm hiding, and that creates disease. And
Yeah.
I
Creates
don't,
disease.
yeah,
Yeah. And that reverberates. You're putting
So
out
many
that
levels.
energy on so many levels. Yeah. Yeah.
Dis-ease
Energetic
on, yeah.
diseases. Yeah.
yeah,
Physical diseases. Yeah.
One thing I like about mentioning hiding, I've said this numerous times. Um, everybody's hiding
yeah,
Mhm.
something. Let's just pick one thing: addiction, whether
Mhm.
it's addicted to alcohol, porn, cupcakes, whatever. Everybody has an addiction. Everybody does. And everybody is hiding from it. Everybody has shame in it,
Mhm.
which is really funny because like we all have shame, but we all have the same problem. We're
Mhm.
shameful that we think that the other person is going to look at us funny. But in reality, like when you kind of open up on these little things, um, people are quite accepting to an extent. And the ones that are not accepting are probably the ones that are hiding the most because they're even more shameful.
yeah. They are hiding the most, but they're also the most unpredictable,
Right. I
right? Unpredictable people, for all of us, right? You guys
Mhm.
too. Unpredictable people are the people you have to watch out for.
mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. I like what you said about creating internal safety, because we what we teach and what we're very adamant about is that we're not going to, the point isn't to make the world safer writ large all the time. It's to learn how to be internally safe. And this is true across, I mean, dimensions and levels that we can talk about for days, but creating the internal sovereignty first, and
Mhm.
then being able to show up in the world, however that is for you, in a way that's like fully authentic, making the difficult decisions
Right.
of letting go of all the identities that made you up. And this is one of the really beautiful gifts of getting out of the military, is like that initial layer of like uniform off. For most people, it doesn't exist. They don't have a uniform off moment. For us who get to take the uniform off, it's like it's such a jarring experience
Mhm.
of then trying to navigate that. At least for me, now being able to learn how to navigate transitions of these cycles of death and rebirth
Right.
is a gift, because what you're able to do then is go, oh, wait a minute, there is no such thing as a rigid identity. There's no such thing as me forever existing as this thing. I'm going to move on, transition. I'm going to expand, whatever. And so that creating the inner safety is the first step. It's like the rock bed that then gives you the ability to navigate more effectively.
Right.
Because if you take things less personally, if things aren't trauma responses anymore, and you know your patterns, you're aware of them, you start to rewire challenges, and then things don't seem as like drastically terrible, it's like, oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting challenge. Let me take that differently this time.
Right.
So I think that is one of the things that we strive to teach others, and that with that you describing it in your own journey is like, oh yeah, of course. Like this is a universal experience of once, if you really want freedom, which is, I remember like being that last year in the military, I was so sick of it. I was like, get me the fuck out of here. And I was a captain in the Marine Corps. So I was like trying to keep my, keep it all together in the uniform. And then, all right, I'm going to be free now. Like, come on, let me out. And that sensation, like, remember what that felt like when you were trapped, stuck in there.
Right.
And, use that as your fuel to be, not necessarily to like agitate you, just to like remember like what your heart really wanted when you were stuck. What does your heart really want when you're trapped, hiding, like you're describing?
Yep.
And trust that thing.
You got to become safe with yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we become safe with ourselves is by noticing places that we hide,
mm-hmm.
asking ourselves why.
Mm-hmm.
How did this start? Why am I hiding? What am I hiding from? How am I doing it? Whether it's cupcakes or whatever, what's going on for me? What's really going on? And then figure out what it is that I'm hiding from. What am I afraid of? What am I ashamed of?
Mm-hmm.
And then unraveling that and coming out a little bit more, because it's lots of layers.
Yeah.
I'm going to end it on that.
Mm-hmm.
That last blurb sentence or multiple sentences were wise words of wisdom to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Karen, thanks for coming on. This was great.
Yeah.
We could have easily gone for another hour and a half. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
The book comes out.
Yeah, 20. Well, okay, cool. Tell us where people can find you, what they can find, and what to look forward to.
So my website is called Hideology, HIDEOLOGY. On there, I do some blogging. If people sign up for my newsletter, I talk about all things hiding, perfectionism, all kinds of ways of hiding, not just for being gay. And I will also be talking about the book. And, my journey and my hope is to help people come out from hiding. That's my goal. That's my purpose. That's my passion. I'm also I'll be starting a 6-week course on hiding. I'm going to try to do that before I start getting really deep into the book, which is going to start at the end of this year. So I'm in this little bit of a break right now. And so I want to do a course on coming up from hiding and helping people with that.
The calm before the storm.
Yeah, well, I was in the calm before the storm, in the calm, and then I had my appendix rupture a month ago. And so I decided that there is no calm before the storm. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. And so I just need to get busy again and get back into it. And actually I feel very motivated and purposeful and inspired to do that. So yeah, just glad to be alive.
Beautiful. I love the phrase that I hear so often. Oh, I'll start this when things calm down.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
I'm not so busy. Yeah.
I'm going to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not been my life.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, again, thanks for coming on. This was a pleasure. This opened up, it allowed me to see a different part of the military that I've never even seen before. So this was great.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, same
really
for me.
The conversation.
Really great experience having you here, and story it's not very often told in the kind of veteran space. So we're happy to share the message and help people explore. Like, this is a complex area, and also there's a lot of really powerful stories of people learning how to evolve and change and learn how to stop hiding.
Thanks. Really appreciate you guys.